Thank you for joining me, guys. We're back again, Lilly Code, and it is day 8. So let's get straight into it. I'm going to just pick up where I left off on day 7. And what we were doing was creating our own styling for this particular area up here of our expense tracker. So our expense, adding in a new item, where you add a new item. So I couldn't find the the associated CSS for this particular file, so we're going to just write some of our own and just make it look less crap. So let's continue with that now, or better, I should just say better. It's going to look better. So here we go. So one thing I want to do is perhaps add some padding around this label. So if you just open up your developer tools, you can do that on Windows with Ctrl Shift and I, or you can do it through your ... menu and go down to developer tools and open it up. On a Mac, if you go to the ... menu and go to open your dev tools, it'll tell you what your shortcut is, because off the top of my head I just can't think of it, but that's how you open up your dev tools. And now we'll just inspect these various elements and just add a bit of padding. So we're going to just have a little look and mess around in the developer tools. These changes won't be saved, but it's a way to test out what your changes are going to look like. So let's just make this full screen here so we have a nice view. And we'll try and add some padding around this label. So like already what I'm thinking to do here is, if I just do, there's the label. So we have our label here. So I was going to say if we just added some padding to the left of the label. So let's do that, padding padding right. And let's go with 20 pixels. What'd be even nicer is if we did if we just set this up with flex, but look, this will do for now. So I just want to make it a bit better. So as we can see here on our first element that we've selected, this padding has been added now, so that looks a bit better there. So we have a bit of padding here, and because we just selected this first level label, the very first label listed on the page, they're all at the same level actually, but because we selected this particular one and added the padding to that item, it only added it here. So if I select the amount, which is the second one down, and I'll show you this in the dev tools here now as well. So here we can see our label, and we've just added in this temporary padding just to test it out and see what it looks like. And then in our second label here, we didn't add it to this item, but when we go and add it to our CSS file, we'll add it to all of them in one go. We'll just call out the label, and all the labels on the page, which are these 3, we'll add that padding to. So it'll happen in one clean sweep. But just to show you, how this is actually working here and how you can interact with your dev tools, is more the focus of what I'm doing here. So if I just select the amount here, and we add some padding to that as well. So let's just add some more padding here just to show you. And so we want to add some padding to the right, and hopefully you can see why that is. I'll explain it now, but hopefully that's apparent. So you could see that happening. So this is the label, this is the left of the label, and this is the right of the label. So just to add that bit of padding, it just looks like a bit better than having the label and the input box squished right up on top of each other like that. So it'll just give us a bit more of a better visual here. Now this isn't top class CSS, guys. I'm just quickly making it look slightly better, because what we really want to focus on in this course is React and how React works and getting to grips with React. CSS isn't the focus, as Max says himself, so I'm just copying what he's saying now. So let's just continue, and we can change this here now. So you can use your down button just to see how things look and where you might want them to go, or else you can just type in the value straight away, as I did with the 20 pixels. So they're the 2 options to mess around and have a look down here. So by selecting this arrow and going over the various parts of your page, the various elements that are on your page, you can select it, and you can come down here then, and whichever item you've selected, if you go back to this highlighted area here and you come down to your element style, that's adding CSS to that exact item that you've selected. So it's just a great way to see what's going to happen when you go and add the CSS for real then. So let's just come into our file, into our project, and we'll add that CSS to this particular item to give it a bit of padding, just to make that look slightly better. So let's do that now. And then I'm also going to just make this writing white because it's a bit difficult to see there. So first of all, we'll add our padding, and then we will do that. So we're in our expense form component here. Let me just see how that looks for you guys. A bit too small, so we keep it nice and big. So we're in our expense form component here, and here's our corresponding CSS file. As we know from our folder structure, as we've been creating these files, we create our JavaScript file, which contains the logic, and then we have our corresponding CSS file, which contains the styling. So this is just a standard React project setup and a recommended React project setup. Depending on your use cases, you might be using SCSS files, it might be slightly different, but and even the capitalized names, the way we have the capital E and capital F, this is the standard approach for React. So just all good little bits to know as you're getting used to this language, or framework I should say. React is a framework for the JavaScript language. So we're just going to close everything else other than this one, because this is getting a bit crowded up here, and just for ease of mind and ease of our eyeballs, we will close everything else so we can see a little bit better. So we close the others, and now we have these two files open. So from here we can see that how we're going to access this and add that padding to all of the labels is we can see all of these labels come under the umbrella of the CSS class of a new expense control. So this class name controls each one of these elements because we've given it the same CSS class name, so therefore the CSS style will be duplicated, so you don't need to duplicate your code and write different CSS classes for each of these. Basically, we've given it the same class selector name, so we can easily change that now in our CSS file. So we'll just copy this name because we're going to need it, and we'll come over here and try and find it in our CSS file. So it doesn't exist yet in our CSS file, which if you were watching yesterday, I did say that I had pulled a later version of Max's CSS. I must have, because all the names are different. So as we get later into the course, I'm not going to delete anything, because as we keep going, it's going to just bam, look great all of a sudden, because he's obviously developed the items a bit more. He's given the different bits different names here, CSS names. So it looks like in a later version the expense item price, so here the amount probably this adds up to, that's going to have its own CSS class. So if I actually just copy this CSS class and put it in here, this would already look better, this particular component, but just for the sake of showing you what's going on, let's just add our own. So I've called out the new expense control CSS class, or the class name as it's called in React, and what we want to do is just add that padding now. Or first we need to call out our label, sorry. So to the label, and because the label is a it's because this is a tag itself, sorry, because this is a tag itself, so like for the input or the label and not a class name, when it's a class name we do dot to access it in order to apply the CSS styling. If it's the tag itself, you don't need to do the dot. You're talking about a different thing. It's not a class name, it's the actual component, the actual tag that you want to add the CSS to. So we'll just do label straight away, and then we can do padding right and give it that 20 pixels that we just seen looked better in our live demo when we were just testing things out in our browser. So semicolon expected. Right, have I put this at the wrong level? So no, I'm not sure why this is telling me I need a semicolon, to be honest. So I'm going to just cut this, which probably isn't what I need to be doing, but I'm going to just cut it for the moment, Make sure it's at the base level. So just to be safe, I'll put it down here, because I don't know why these are indented. Just because we don't want to nest it. I'm not talking about something inside something, although I could nest it inside the new expense controls. Can you even do that with CSS, or is that just SCSS? I think that's the benefit of moving. That is the benefit of moving towards SCSS from CSS, because in SCSS you can do things like nest it. So because the new expense control class name is within the new expense controls class name, in order to make things clear, what we do in SCSS is new expense. I'm so used to using SCSS now in work that I just wasn't certain. So, but I'm sure we can't do this. That's the benefit of SCSS. So yes, so in a CSS file, nesting like this doesn't work. Whereas in an SCSS file, you could do something like this, and it's very handy for readability. It's great. You just sort of know what's going on. You can say, okay, so if the control, it's within the new expense controls, and then you have an idea of what that structure is in your file, in your HTML file or your JS file. In this case, it's a JS file, but SCSS can be used to style HTML, JS. Different types of styling can be applied the same way that CSS would be used, but it just has more features, aka things like nesting. So we'll just go back to our original, and do you know what? Padding right, so padding colon, sometimes it can be something so silly, right? So, I'm nesting it. That's why I've got so used to doing nesting, as I was saying, from work, that I've nested this. That's my error. It's not looking for a semicolon, which was throwing me right off. I shouldn't be nesting. We can't do that in CSS. So I'm going to take this out, put it down here, and now, bravo, everything is all gravy. Everything is all gravy. So now we have our padding added, and that should be working. So let's just reload this page. And see what's going on. Okay. So there's something up with the keys, but we won't worry about that for this immediate moment. So here we can see we've added that padding now. So the thing I was testing, I'm going to just add an entry for 2022. Excuse me, sorry. So I'm going to just add an entry for 2022, because constantly looking at this blank list is no fun. So we'll add a briefcase. I had a feeling I spelled it wrong. So anyway, I told you don't need to be a whiz to be a coder. You just need to practice. So spelling isn't even necessary to an extent. But no, really, you do just need to practice. So please do take that on board. You do not need to be a whiz kid. You just need to be diligent in your learning. Anybody can do this. I firmly believe that. So please don't for a moment think that this looks too complex. You just need to practice and start off somewhere smaller. And there's probably a lot of people going, oh, I'm too practiced. This is very boring. But anybody can practice and learn this skill. So let's continue. So the date we're going to put in is 2022, because that's my bugbear here. Excuse me, I have a frog in my throat. So we'll just add that, and that didn't add, so something is going on. And once it's not my internet connection, I'm a happy camper. So let's do title of okay, yeah. I before E except after C. Come on, Leanne. We learned that back in primary school. So we'll do 29.99, and then we will give ourselves a date here. I want it to be 2022, and I'm going to try and see what happens, because something didn't fire. Okay. This was working. This happens a lot in coding as well. Things will be working, then all of magically they won't be working, and then magically they'll be working again. So try and pay attention to the changes you're making, because you'll find sometimes there is not 13 months in a year. If you're in America, sorry if that confused you. I'm only joking. We do our day formats differently, so that was just a joke. And then we'll do 2019 and submit that. Okay, great. So it's only our year 2022 that isn't working. We've now proven that our list is still working, and we can continue to try and get through this error and fix it. So Max just so happens to be speaking about keys in this current video that I'm supposed to be, well, that I'm going to watch. So I'm going to just have a little listen, because, well, first of all, let's just do a bit of an investigation before we just jump in and cheat and get the solution. So, check the render method of expenses. See this for more information. So what's this telling me? Keys help React identify which items have changed or added or removed. Well, that sounds very pertinent to our current situation, because we are adding an item. Keys should be given to the elements inside the array to give the elements a stable identity. That makes perfect sense. So I had thought we had implemented this, but clearly something is wrong with our implementation. So let's go and check this out. So I'm going to come to expenses, because that's where we were told this error was. So we'll come in here and we'll just check what's going on when we're mapping, and then we're adding our ID here, but we're clearly missing something. So let's just go back to the documentation and see what this has to say. So what they do here is they have defined a constant, and then they're just mapping over a list of numbers, this array of numbers, and assigning an ID as they go through here. So for each of these numbers in this array, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at position 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4, because array numbering starts at 0. I keep mentioning this, but it just seems important. And yes, so what it's doing here is the map is taking each item in that array and traversing through them one by one. So first of all, you're going to get 1, then you're going to get 2, 3, 4, 5. And what it's doing with each of these numbers, as it maps it from the array and gets each singular number from 1 to 5, what it's doing is it's adding that as the key. And it's adding it as a key, but as a string rather than as a number. So here we can see the toString method being called on this number, which is just making that number into a string, and then that's being used as the key. And then they're also in the list, for the display of the list, you're just going to see number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, because they are interpolating out this result. Not certain if that's actually called interpolation in React, but I know in Angular, when you have 2 double curly brackets like that and you're displaying something back out, it's called interpolation. So apology if my terminology is incorrect there, but at least you know what interpolation is in Angular. So let's just keep going and continue. So when you do not have a stable ID, you may use the index as a key as the last resort. Okay. So I think it's just because, well, we're mapping our expenses and they have an ID. So therefore, this should be working. Because as we go through our filtered expenses, so we've got a list of expenses to begin with, we filter them down based on some condition. The condition is the year given on that particular expense the same as the year in the drop down? If so, show me those particular entries or expenses. And then as we loop these subset of expenses, aka the ones that match with that year, so just have a particular year subset. Sorry, I don't want the plane to be distracting. As we loop through this filtered expenses and are just all expenses of the 1 year, we're then going through them one by one because we're mapping them. As I explained with the previous map function, you're getting each expense in the list of filtered expenses and going through it one by one. And for what we want to do with these is we want to render it as an expense item, each expense in that list. So here when we have key and we're equaling it to expense.id, that should really be doing that for us, giving a key, which is what this is giving out about. So should have a unique key. So is there some way that possibly we have two keys that are the same? I don't know, but let's just console log out our key as it comes around. Yeah, we're still within our loop, so yeah, console log key. So if we just do it like this, will you work? No. Okay. So these are the little nuances. If I do it in here, no. In here, I think if I do it in here, although that doesn't look much different from where it was before, so no. So these are the bits that confuse me with React, to be honest, is like, where do I put my console log? Sometimes it doesn't work, other times it does. There's clearly a rule I haven't quite grasped yet. And perhaps this is because this is already in this block that's already doing this. That seems to make sense, which would mean to me, so let's see, okay. So this entire object is basically what's happening when we run the function, the expense. So actually I think if we add it out here, and I don't think we need the curly brackets because we've already opened up this particular curly bracket saying we want this code to be functional, to do something for us. We've already opened and closed that, so I don't think we're going to need them again. So I'm just going to go ahead with console log. Incorrect guessing, Leanne, but look, guessing will get you somewhere eventually, so keep on guessing. But I'm going to just finish this in the hopes that this is going to work. Not this particularly because I have an error, but if I do this, now will you work? Okay, look, I give up. I'm not just going to, well, I shouldn't give up. Excuse me. So let's try and console log out something and see where we can log it and what's the format for that. So I think down here I should be able to console log. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So that's fine. And then we'll see hello. Excuse me. So then perhaps if we just console log out our filtered expenses, down here I can just go and access the keys and I can have a look at them and see what the key is if I can't do it on the fly and look at them the way I wanted to. So this isn't very fitting. We should really be matching our console logs to what it's actually doing. So let's do that. So here, now we can see our filtered expenses has come out. I opened a bottle of wine over the weekend and thought I'd treat myself to a glass of red. So yes, delish. So in here now we can see our filtered expenses, and you know, you can't leave wine sitting around, red wine, white wine, any wine, for too long because it just goes a bit gross. So, okay, so our array is coming back empty. Why is that? Other people will be looking at this and it might be very obvious to them, but as of yet, and something else is going on here as well. Okay, so it's still back down to the keys, so hopefully when we fix this issue, we may fix that issue. So I'm logging this out at the wrong place. Our filtered expenses should have already been assigned though. So what I'll do, So I'm not sure why this is empty, okay? Because, is it because we've mapped them and then we don't have it? So, see, I don't want to just spiel if I'm not certain and tell you incorrect things. So I'll keep my thoughts to myself for a moment. Let's see what this... Sorry, just gonna pause for a sec. I just had to pause there for a moment to get that frog. That frog's still living in my throat. So I've just put this console log up a little bit higher, and let's save and see what's going on now if we get a different result. So in my mind now, because we're console logging this out before we've mapped it, there should be something in there, because what else are we mapping? Oh, I'm not looking at anything on the friggin' page. See how simple errors can be sometimes, or you're just a bit confused, and bring it back down. Bring it back down. Take a breath, take a look, and you'll figure it out. Don't get panicked, honestly. It's my best advice. So now we're going to have something in that object. Now we've got 3 items, and let's move it back down under and see if we still have something down there. So I'll call this filtered expensers. Filtered expensers? Filtered expensers before map. And then we'll do after map, because I think that mapping is going to change this object, which is what I was going to say earlier, but I just didn't want to tell you something unless I was certain. But now we're going to test it out, so now we'll know. But as far as I'm concerned, map changes the item in the original array. That's what mapping does. It takes each item and creates, replaces. No, it just traverses over them. We'll find out now. Let's have a look. So this is after map. So, okay, so it doesn't do anything. Perfect, right. So now we've got a few answers there out of that little experiment and what we were doing. So the first reason why we were seeing an empty array up here, why we weren't seeing any expenses, was because there was no expenses on our page. We had no expenses in any array because we were looking at a year where there was nothing. So if we go back down now to our most recent logs, we'll see that these are empty, and that makes sense. There's nothing on the page. There are no expenses to show. So then if we select a year that has some expenses associated, so now again, because we changed the selection and we have this being fired on the on-click event, we again see 2 empty. We again see 2 empty arrays here. So then if we go to a year that actually has something, some expenses logged for it, we can now see those expenses being logged. So here we are now. We have our 3 different items which match up to the 3 different items that are being displayed on the page, and we can see before map and after map. So my theory that perhaps we weren't seeing something because map was altering the data, I should have known that was incorrect. All map is doing is going through that array one by one. It's just a loop. It's basically a much easier way, the ES6 version of a loop. It's a handy loop syntax. Whereas I thought maybe it was altering it because other commands that you would apply, ES6 that you would apply to arrays like filter, would give you back a different array at the end of it. So if you were to use the dot filter method and filter by a certain condition, it will only return those items from the original array that have those particular values in it. So you would get an altered array then. So, but not in this case. All we're doing is traversing over that array. So now I can come in here and have a look at the expense item and the key. So where's the key? Well, that's just no good, is it? Because I don't know. Oh. Like, is it just the number in the array? Expense.id. So I can't add a console log in here for within here because that's what it's rendering off the back of the map. So in here we're still within this, but I still can't log out here. Oh. So I need to find out what's going on with this ID. I was expecting to see an ID field, I don't know why, but I was. So now what I'm going to do, after having a good stab at this, I'm going to just watch Max's video for a moment and see if he has an answer and if it just clicks and makes sense, because there's no point in wasting time either. So let's have a quick look at what Max is doing and I will explain as soon as I get a bit of understanding here. Okay, so first thing I've already learnt is the key isn't something that we're adding, which is quite obvious in a way, because we did create the expense item to have these particular properties. But the key itself is inbuilt. You can just stick the key onto a React component and it's inbuilt in order to give you that ID functionality. So if it's a custom component or if it's a built-in HTML component, you can always add key. Oh, snap-a-lack-a-jack. So the problem is that Maximilian has added IDs to his original array. We have not. That's why we can't access the expense.id. So when I was coming in here looking for it to have an ID property, it should have had an ID property, and then I just totally second guessed myself. Try not to do that. I guess with time I'll get better, and I'm trying to encourage you is just don't start doing it in the beginning. If you think you have a hunch and you're correct, go with your hunch. Listen to your gut. I mean, yeah, I was like, oh, should I know that there's a hidden ID thing that I don't know about and I'm gonna not know about it if I say I don't know about it? No, Max has the ID added. He added it in when he created the array. So therefore, if we go to the expense item component, incorrect component. So where is he? He's in app.js. Okay. So the expense item is just one particular expense item, but we're populating this from app.js. So here we can see our dummy data, and he has an ID attribute added to these objects. So that's what's going on there. And he's named them, strangely enough, expense one. Yeah, it's not really that strange. Because normally an ID would just be 1, 2, 3. Well, not always. Clearly not in this case. We've gone with E1, which stands for expense 1. So we'll just add these IDs in and then we shall be flying, and we won't get that issue anymore, I presume. So now if I just reload this page. So we still have that error. And so that was an incorrect year to be using, because we've set this up that it needs to be a recent year, which I might change. Okay, so 2021. Great. So there we go, we've added our milk in for $2 and the date is given that we supplied when we added it in. So I'm going to just keep on going here with the video. Actually, one other thing I did want to do is change this to white, just so it doesn't look so difficult to read. So again, we come to our developer tools and we just use this little square box with an arrow, and then that allows us to select this item. And then just to test this out, as I did before, we can come in here and to change the color of text, you just go color and then white. And now if I move away, we can see that that is now white. So if we want to find out how to find this back in our project, you can follow it back from your developer tools here. So we can see here we've added the label style of white to the filter by year. So there's many ways to find this. You could search for filter by year in your particular project, although in bigger projects, when you get into a coding job, these things might be displayed dynamically or come from somewhere else, so you won't be able to search directly for them in your project. You'll find a lot of the text you can't find when you go and search for it in a professional setting, depending on your particular project and how your project is set up. But that's how it's been for me. So if that particular label fails, well then you just keep going up the chain and then you can figure your way down. So label on the whole project, that's not descript enough. That's like looking for a div, it's like looking for an ID, like as in actual ID. If you're looking for the name of an ID, that's a great thing to look for. If you're looking for something and you have an ID there, stick that into the search bar and you'll most likely pinpoint where you need to get to quite quickly. So label is too generic. So we'll move up, as would div be, because there's too many divs all over the project. So if I just quickly show you, and this is, so you can see we've got divs everywhere, div, div, div. You won't find anything like that. So the class name, CSS class name, this is a great way to find where it is that you want to make this change in your code for real, now that we've tested it out in the browser. So with that, we're going to search for this class name in our finder here. So I'll just paste that in, and look, we only have one instance of this. So handy. So we have our expenses filter control, and then within that, so we have a div which has the class name of expenses filter control, and nested within that div is all of this stuff here. So as we can see, we just have a label, the one label, filter by year, and then the select options. So how do you think we might add the CSS to this? We did something similar only a moment ago. So the first thing we do is go to our CSS file, and as we can see, once you open up, it brings you to your JS file. So you just click on the corresponding CSS file, and what you want to do then is, and now I've lost my corresponding JS file. What you want to do then is call out this particular CSS class, or we could call out this particular CSS class, because that's still nesting everything. And then there's only one label in here, so once your project gets a bit bigger, you might want to add a class name, make sure that styles aren't bleeding into other places. But for now, we only have this one label, and it makes sense to just call out our CSS. We cannot nest. I was going to try and nest once again, but we're not talking about SCSS, we're talking about CSS. So rather than worrying about this class name at all we have to do is just pull this label, go to our CSS, stick the word label in there. We don't need a dot because it's not a CSS class name. Add color and white, and do a semicolon, and then that's just a colon, is it? That's a colon. That's a semicolon. Is it? Colon versus semi. You know what I'm talking about. We just add this at the end. My brain has escaped me. Maybe I definitely shouldn't have had any wine. But we'll just continue. So I'm doing this session obviously in the evening, so my internet was bad yesterday. It's been bad all week, to be honest, so I was thinking I might have to put the nail on the head for this for a while, but I'm going to just see how I continue to go, and I don't want to pause it, I don't want to quit, so I prefer to keep going. But if I have issues like what I had over the weekend with the internet, it will be totally unfeasible to continue, because this is about learning, not about, you know, wasting time. So I'm just going to continue to watch the video for a moment, and so we can progress here. Is the internet acting the maggot again? That's just slang in Ireland for behaving badly, acting the maggot. It's back on, so. Oh, this is a bit slow. Guys, I'm running into technical issues. This is loading quite slow. Well, it's not loading at the moment. So we best get creative. So it's been 45 minutes. You know, rather than bring you through all this, we may have to call it a day for the moment. Okay guys, so we're doing okay, so I'm going to just continue on here. Yeah, I've got it back running, so let's go. So basically what we're going to do now is handle the cases. What we're going to do now is handle the cases where there's nothing in the list. So that's what we're going to do. So I'll just close off these other folders again. Keep it a bit clean. And if there's no item, then we want to just say that. So rather than this console log, I'll remove this and we'll use this for something else now. So we'll check if our filtered expenses list is empty. So if there's nothing in here, Yeah. Okay. So now we want all of this to go in. Okay, and we can add our semicolons. So yeah, no, we don't need them. Okay, it's just strange seeing a parenthesis with a curly parenthesis with no semicolon at the end, but in JSX code we don't need them, we don't use them like that, so I didn't need to add that there, but why have I got filtered expenses? So now I need to get rid of this because this is all included in this one rendering block of code. So okay, so I had an extra parenthesis, so now doesn't seem to be showing this. So what we're doing here now is we have a conditional statement here, and what this is saying is if we have filtered expenses, if filtered expenses are equal to 0, then we want to show no expenses true, so in the true case, and in the false case otherwise show this. So that's what's happening to Ternary. Okay, so rather than using the ternary, he has done it through just and ors and comparison expressions. So here what we are doing instead is we have if the filtered expenses is definitely 0 and then we can give our what we wanted to do. So then we want this to happen, so we want no expenses available. So just get rid of this and move this up here, so you can just select it and drag it up. And then in the second case, what we want to do is if filtered expenses that is actually handy. I just seen that there now, that's very handy. So then what we want to do is if filtered expenses dot length is greater than 1. Oh, I forgot the dot length. No wonder. So this should be dot length because we need to know how many items are in that particular array. So that's why we add the dot length there, which is probably why it wasn't working before, because I just forgot dot length and getting ahead of myself. So if dot length is greater than 0, or aka if there's more than one item in the array, if there's more than one filtered expense or expense for that particular year, then this is what we want to do. And then we have our filtered expenses dot map. Yeah, and we're obviously missing a closing curly bracket here, and we probably have too many circling, so he just has circle, circle, or roundy parenthesis, 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 curly bracket. Yeah, okay. So now let's see how that goes. I mean, this is still going on, but yeah, just gonna click play. Okay, so this should not be there. Well, first of all, I should have closed this off, so okay, so that needs to be self-contained in those rendering blocks because it's just one, so it's a block of code that we want to return, that we wanted to do something, which is why it's wrapped in these, because it's a smart little block of code. It's doing something, it's analyzing something, which is why we wrap it in these. It's not just putting a paragraph out on the page, which in that case we wouldn't need these if it was included in the return open and closing parentheses. But because it's doing something smart, basically this condition statement, like it's checking something, if we have the filtered expenses array has a length of nothing, or there's nothing in the array, if there is no expenses to show, then we want to show this paragraph no expenses shown. And then in the other case, so if we do have more than one filtered expense, then we want to show this particular block of code. So that's what's going on there. And now it needs an extra closing bracket, which makes perfect sense. So where's this one coming from? In my mind, that should be working now. Okay, so he's changing it even again, so I'm not going to worry about hunting down that final closing bracket because he's changing the functionality again. So he's extracting out this particular piece of logic so that we don't need to do that in the return statement itself, just so the return statement can be a bit clearer. So, sorry. Just so the return statement can be a bit clearer there. So we're going to continue on by extracting out some of this. Okay, that's so handy. So you can also store JSX content in a variable like this, that's great. I did not know that about React, or at least I hadn't tweaked yet in my mind. I am new to the framework, so I'm learning as I go here, as hopefully you guys are too. So I didn't realize you could do that, so that's very handy. I'm happy I just found that out. Delighted. And then we're going to do an if check. So then we have the logic out here. If the filtered expenses dot length is greater than 0, so, or if there's one item there, then we want to open up these curly brackets, and in here then we want to display our expense item. So we're going to actually take this whole block of code now, and this can go up here. So we're just separating it out, taking it out of the return to keep things clean down below. Oh, very good, Max. Yes, yes, I see that now. Super de-duper. Okay, so what we've done is, first of all, yeah, this needs a self-closing tag. It's just here, and his project, it's down here, so I'll just move it over for visual synchronicity there, and then I will just do what he did here. So what he did was, he's after defining expense content as this particular JSX string that can then be used to be plugged in once we call this particular variable that we've defined up here. And then what he has also done is done an if statement, and if the filtered expenses dot length is greater than 0, we're going to overwrite that this let, the variable, which is why it is not a constant. Holy Moses, holy baloney. Every time I need new equipment in the house, I can't do it anymore. It's like a little mouse. Okay, let's just keep going. I like to make up songs a lot of the time. It's one of my passions, is making silly songs. So we'll just continue anyway. I'm always singing them to my dad. So we'll just go on. So basically what he's done is he's defined this let, which why it's not a const, because we're going to override it, which is the whole purpose of let and const. If you have something that's going to remain constant, like what's coming out here. So once we run this page, this filtered expenses only needs to be maintained once per instance of being run. So it's a constant. Whereas this particular variable, the expense content, it's going to change very quickly after if this condition is true, which is why it's let instead of const, so we can reassign it later on in the same file or somewhere else. So we have our let, well, in the same file because it's scope driven, so it's within the same file. We have our constant, our let, and we're going to reassign this here. So now we're going to say if we have more than one, then we want to make our expense content equal to this instead. So basically now all we need to do to display it down here is just send back the expense content, and this will switch for us now. So that's much cleaner. We can really see what's going on. We're not messing about with all them brackets, getting confused as I was before. So now that should work better. So let's just check out what's going on. So we did call it expense content, and it's to aha because of our loop. So how does he fix that bit then? Oh, because I missed the loop, did I? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so over the course of doing that, I got rid of the map line. So we did have map in there. So what we were actually doing was not just taking one expense item, we were mapping over all of the filtered expenses and mapping them to this expense item. So I need to add back in filtered expenses dot map, and this is what we want to map. Yeah, the expense to an individual expense item for each one of those expense items, and we're going to need to close off bracket here. And that should be that. Hey, so we've got our text here now, no expenses available. So if I just go and let's style this as well so we can actually see it. So if I hover, click this, this is our expenses filter. So we'll grab this class now. We'll go into our CSS. I'll just add this very quick. I'll add color and white. So there we go. And if I reload, why isn't it white? I think I did it. So, oh, because we're in the wrong file. So our expenses filter is actually, this CSS class isn't coming from the file we were just in. For a moment, because I was going so quick, I just mistook it to be in the wrong file, I think. But this expenses filter control is actually coming from our expenses filter component, and here we have our expenses filter control. So this is what we should be then adding this white class to. So I can just add a comma here and do it like that and save. You can string along different things by doing a comma. and it'll apply the same thing to them then. So, or maybe it won't. So let's just try it down here. So expenses filter. I'm going to just slow down for a moment. And this is the last time I drink wine on the video or while studying. So I think it's just because I literally forgot the last letter. Just going a bit too quick. So if I add a dot here, there we go. And now this should work, please. That should work. And one. Okay, so no expenses available. We added that in from our other component though, so it's not in here. So expenses filter control. Let me just see if I don't know why this would make any difference, but just to rule out some possibilities, and obviously this should only be one dot here, and then if we go color white, and no, and it's because it's coming from the other place. So in order to fix this, what I'm going to do is if I cut this, go back to my expenses and add a class name to this paragraph, and I'll call the class name expensesfilter.js because this is the file where this particular string is contained. So by adding the class name to this instead of this same name, expenses filter control, we don't need all this other stuff. Some more cool songs for you guys. And then if we go into the expenses.css and paste in that whole thing, now it should be right. Okay. So there you go, super de duper. We're getting somewhere slowly but surely, and I'm just going to add all of these changes now and save where we're at. So in order to do this, you can come here to your source control and add each of these files individually. But seeing as I just want to send them all up there and it's okay, I'm going to just do git add everything, git commit, and give it a commit message of where we are in our current project, where we've got to. So right now we are outputting conditional content, chapter 5. So we'll start off with day 8, chapter 5, outputting conditional content. Okay, and then we'll just, so I need to cd into the correct folder. I do not need to be in the git folder. So I'll just go back like this, and then if I run those commands again, so now we've added all of those files, and you can just press up to pull up your previous commands that you're after running, and then we can git push, and there we go, there you have it. And I'm just going to check my GitHub and see this little old light, because that's fun. So oh no, so it hasn't logged it just yet, so that's okay. Okay, so it's saying no commits today, but that's okay. We will just keep on going with this here now. I don't really mind. For the time being, I'm gonna come back and continue to code myself anyway. I'm just gonna relax for a while and sort out my evening and get an early night, hit the hay, but I will come back and do a little bit of this and also just find out why it isn't committing. So I mean, let's just change one more. Well, these haven't even been added. actually. So let's just do it together. So look, if I click add here, these will add these to the staging area, which should be the same as doing the git commit or the git add dot that I already did. So if I add all of these and now go git commit, and I'm going to keep that same message because that's just a relevant message, and then git push, now it's going to work. I just hadn't actually added them correctly. So there we go. And now if I reload my page, there we go. We've got our little light. There's a light on. So yeah, there you go. Random songs, random lights. Beautiful. So have a lovely day, guys. Thanks a million for joining me, and catch me again tomorrow for day 9 of 100 Days of Code, and stay tuned for my other informative videos where I actually explain concepts as opposed to just fumble around and figure out code. But hopefully you still enjoy it and have a wonderful day. Thanks so much. Bye bye.